The first thing that woke me was the sound. Not loud, not sharp, just a soft, hollow ping that drifted through the dark like a pebble dropped into still water. My eyes opened slowly. For a few seconds, I didn't move. My room was still wrapped in that heavy, suffocating quiet that only exists deep in the night when the world outside feels completely abandoned. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed faintly red. 3:17 a.m., the kind of hour where sleep feels thick and dreams still cling to your mind. I rubbed my eyes and rolled onto my side. Another ping. My phone. The glow from the screen spilled across the bedside table and stretched faintly along the wall. I frowned. No one ever messaged me this late. Half awake, I reached for the phone and unlocked it. One notification. Gallery 1 new photo added. For a moment, I just stared at the message. My brain struggled to process it. A photo? I muttered quietly. I hadn't taken any pictures tonight. In fact, I hadn't touched my phone since I put it on the table before falling asleep. My apartment was small, barely more than a studio. One room, a bathroom, and a narrow kitchen. And I lived alone. No roommates. No pets. No one with access to my phone. Still, the notification sat there calmly as if nothing about it was strange. A new photo, added 1 minute ago. I opened the gallery. The newest image appeared at the top. The thumbnail was dark, almost completely black. For a second, I wondered if it was some accidental screenshot or corrupted file. Then I tapped it. The image expanded across the screen. My stomach dropped instantly. The photo showed my bed. The exact bed I was lying in right now. The blankets. The dim yellow light from my bedside lamp. And in the middle of it, May, sleeping. The image had clearly been taken from across the room near the closet door. My body lay half curled under the blanket. My arm hanging over the edge of the mattress. My mouth slightly open. My chest rising and falling slowly.
I stared at the screen.
Then I slowly lifted my eyes and looked around the room. The same bed, the same blanket, the same position. My pulse began to throb in my neck. The photo was recent.
Very recent. I checked the timestamp.
3:16 a.m., 1 minute before the notification woke me. My fingers suddenly felt cold against the phone. That's not possible, I whispered. I turned my head slowly and looked toward the corner of the room. The closet stood there, silent and closed. The light from my lamp barely reached that part of the room, leaving most of it swallowed by shadow. Nothing moved. Nothing shifted. No sound. Just the faint hum of electricity from somewhere in the walls. I looked back down at the photo. The angle was wrong for a self-timer. And even if I had somehow set one up while asleep, my phone had been charging beside the bed. I looked at the charging cable, still plugged in, exactly where it always was, which meant one thing.
Someone had picked up my phone.
Taken the photo, then placed the phone back on the table, right beside my head. My heartbeat began to speed up. I told myself. Maybe I sleepwalked.
Maybe I took the photo myself.
But that didn't make sense. The photo was taken from across the room. I would have had to stand near the closet, take the photo, walk back, put the phone on the charger, then fall asleep again. And I had never sleepwalked in my life.
I zoomed into the image.
The camera grain sharpened as the picture enlarged.
My face.
The pillow, the wrinkles in the blanket, then the background, the closet door, and the shadow beside it.
I froze.
There was something wrong with that shadow. At first, it looked like nothing more than darkness pooling near the wall. But as I zoomed further, I noticed the shape. Tall, too tall to be furniture, and narrow, like a body standing upright. My breathing slowed. The outline wasn't clear enough to make out details, but it was unmistakably human. A faint silhouette standing beside the closet, watching the bed.
Watching me.
My heart slammed once hard. I quickly lifted my head and looked toward the corner of the room. The closet. The shadows. Nothing moved. No shape. No person. Just darkness. A strange pressure crept into my chest. Maybe it's just a shadow, I thought. The brain loves to invent shapes in darkness. Faces in clouds. Figures in fog. Maybe the camera picked up some weird lighting artifact. Maybe my phone vibrated suddenly in my hand. Ping. I nearly dropped it. Another notification. Another photo. Added just now. My throat went dry. Very slowly. This one was different. The camera had moved closer. The angle was now beside the bed, close enough that my face filled most of the frame.
My hair messy.
My eyelids closed. My breathing peaceful.
Still asleep.
Except, I wasn't asleep anymore. I was staring at the image of myself sleeping. A cold ripple ran down my spine. Then I noticed something else. In the reflection of my half-open eye, a tiny distorted shape appeared. At first it looked like a blur, but when I zoomed in, I could see fingers wrapped around the phone, and behind them a long, thin arm, holding the camera inches from my face. The arm didn't look right. It was too pale, too thin. The skin stretched tight over bone like paper, and just beyond the edge of the frame, something darker leaned toward me, a face, barely visible, so close to my sleeping body that its shadow touched my cheek. My breath caught in my throat. If the photo was taken seconds ago, then whoever took it
Was still in my room. Right now.
I didn't scream. That was the strangest part. Later, when I tried to remember those first few seconds after opening the second photo, I realized that terror didn't hit me the way it does in movies. It didn't explode out of me in noise or movement. It moved inward. It hardened. It turned all the air inside my chest to stone. I sat perfectly still in bed, holding my phone so tightly my fingers ached, and stared at the image of my own sleeping face while my mind tried and failed to accept the simplest, ugliest possibility. Someone was inside my apartment. Not earlier. Not an hour ago. Now. The room around me seemed to change shape after that. Every familiar object lost something human and harmless and became part of a larger secret pattern I had never noticed before. The dresser against the far wall looked too tall. The narrow strip of darkness under the bathroom door seemed deeper than it should have been. My chair in the corner, with yesterday's clothes draped over it, resembled a hunched figure waiting patiently for permission to stand. The lamp beside my bed cast a weak amber light, but it no longer felt comforting. It only made the shadows beyond it look denser, more deliberate, as though the darkness wasn't the natural absence of light anymore, but a material thing. Something gathered. Something thick, something with weight. My ears strained against the silence. The old refrigerator in the kitchenette hummed faintly. Pipes somewhere in the building clicked once, then settled. A car passed outside in the street below, its tires whispering over wet pavement. Then nothing. No footsteps. No breathing except my own. No rustle of clothes. No creak of floorboards. And still I knew with a certainty so primitive it felt older than language that I was not alone. I very slowly lowered the phone from my face and listened. My apartment was small. From the bed I could see almost everything. The short hall leading to the bathroom, the edge of the kitchenette, the front door with its deadbolt and chain, the closet near the corner where the first photograph had been taken. The only places something could truly hide were the bathroom, behind the shower curtain, inside the closet, or in the blind angles near the kitchen counter. The closet. My eyes returned to it. A flat white door with a brass knob. Half the paint chipped near the bottom from years of use. Nothing remarkable. Nothing menacing. And yet every part of me was fixed on it. The first picture had been taken from that side of the room. The second from beside the bed. Which meant either someone had crossed the room silently after taking the first photo, or they had never left the bedside at all. A new thought entered my mind, cold and immediate. What if the second photo had not been taken seconds ago? What if it was being taken while I slept, yes, but stored, delayed, then delivered all at once? That would mean the person could be gone already. The relief that thought offered lasted less than a second. Because if the person had already been in my room once, if they had stood over me and photographed my face in my sleep and returned my phone to the nightstand without waking me, then whether they were still here or not was almost irrelevant. The safety I thought I had inside these walls was already dead. My apartment no longer belonged to me. It had been entered, observed, used. I swallowed hard and glanced at the front door. Still shut. Chain in place. Deadbolt locked. I knew because I always checked it twice before bed. It was an old ritual from living alone, one of many pointless little habits people invent to make themselves feel protected. Lock the deadbolt. Pull the curtains. Keep your keys in the same bowl. Control your corners. Name your routines. Pretend the world respects them. My mouth had gone dry. I licked my lips and looked back at the second photo. Then I did something I wish I hadn't. I zoomed in further. The image broke apart into grain and shadow, but more details emerged through the distortion. My cheek. A strand of hair across my forehead. The blur of the blanket near my shoulder. The glint of the phone screen reflected faintly in my skin. And there, along the right edge of the frame, just behind the pale hand holding the phone, I saw something that made my stomach lurch so violently I nearly gagged. Hair, not on me. Long strands, dark and damp-looking, hanging forward into the image. As if whoever held the phone had been leaning over me so closely that their hair brushed my face. I pulled the phone away and shut my eyes. A smell seemed to rise in my memory then, sudden and vivid. Not from the room, not at first. From somewhere just below conscious thought. A memory triggered by the image. A smell like wet fabric left too long in darkness. Like rain-soaked wood. Like the sour mineral odor of a basement that never fully dries. I opened my eyes again and breathed in carefully. For a second I smelled nothing but the dust-warm scent of the room, the detergent in my sheets, the faint metallic tang of my lamp heating the air. Then, beneath it, something else. Damp, mildewed, subtle but present. My skin prickled. It could have been coming from the bathroom. Old buildings always held moisture in their pipes. It could have drifted up from another apartment. It could have been there for days, and only now, with my nerves open like wounds, had I finally noticed it. But deep down I knew what my fear wanted me to believe, that the smell belonged to whoever had stood over me while I slept. My hand shook as I opened the camera app. The screen showed the room from where I sat in bed. The lens adjusted to the low light, introducing a fuzz of digital noise over everything. I panned slowly toward the closet and zoomed in. Nothing. Just the door, the wall, the slice of carpet beneath it. I moved the camera toward the kitchenette, the counter, the cabinets, the dark square of the sink. Nothing. Toward the bathroom hall, the cracked frame, the darkness inside. Nothing. Then I rotated the phone slowly toward the side of the bed to the narrow gap between mattress and wall. The screen trembled. Empty. I almost laughed then. Not because anything was funny, but because something inside me was nearing the point where panic begins to resemble hysteria. I imagined how ridiculous I would look to another person. A grown adult in a rumpled t-shirt, sitting rigid in bed in the middle of the night, sweeping a camera around a one-room apartment as if hunting ghosts. But the pictures were real. The timestamps were real. The hand in the reflection was real. I went to the photo details. Maybe there'd be some clue there. Device model, file origin, some strange app or hidden transfer process. Something technical, logical, explainable. The metadata loaded. Taken on this device. Rear camera. No flash. No edits. No imports. No cloud sync artifact. No save from messaging app trail. It had been taken by my phone. Here. In this room. I felt the urge to call the police. It surged through me so fast I almost did it immediately. My thumb even hovered over the emergency screen. Then I stopped, and hated myself for stopping. Because the truth was simple and ugly. I didn't know what I would say. Hello, someone took pictures of me while I was sleeping.
Do you know who? No. Are they still there?
I don't know. Did you see them?
No.
Was anything stolen?
Forced entry?
Damage?
No.
All I had were 2 photographs and a fear so intense it felt irrational even to me. And beneath that practical hesitation was another truth, one I didn't want to admit. I was afraid to make noise. Afraid that if someone was still in the apartment, the sound of my voice would tell them I was awake. So instead, I did what frightened people always do when they should act immediately. I tried to gather more proof. I lowered the brightness on my phone until the screen barely glowed. Then I slipped out of bed. The floor was cold under my bare feet. My knees felt weak enough that I had to steady myself with one hand on the mattress. Every spring inside the bed seemed obscenely loud as my weight left it. I stood still and listened. Nothing. The apartment seemed to hold its breath with me. I reached for the lamp and turned it off. Darkness folded over the room at once, thick and intimate. Only the light from the street outside remained, seeping dimly through the blinds and thin silver bars. It striped the walls and floor and the edge of the closet door. Everything looked flatter, meaner. Shapes lost detail and became silhouettes. The room felt larger in the dark, but also more crowded. I activated the phone's flashlight. A clean white beam cut through the room, making the darkness around it seem even blacker. I turned first toward the front door. Locked. Chain set. I checked it with trembling fingers anyway, touching the cold metal just to feel something definite. Solid. Human-made. Then I moved toward the kitchenette. The beam passed over the table, the sink, a chipped mug, the magnets on the fridge. I crouched and looked beneath the counter. Nothing. I checked behind the narrow pantry door. Nothing but canned soup, stale cereal, and cleaning supplies. The smell of dampness grew stronger near the hall. The bathroom, of course. I stood outside the half-open bathroom door and stared at the gap. The flashlight in my hand shook visibly now, causing the beam to shiver over the frame. My own voice sounded foreign when I finally spoke. "If someone is in here," I said quietly, "I'm calling the police." Silence. The shower curtain inside the bathroom hung closed. I never left it closed. I always tied it back because the room was too small otherwise, and I hated the way a closed shower curtain made the bathroom feel occupied even when it wasn't. I knew with sudden absolute certainty that I had left it open before bed. The damp smell drifted from the dark gap beneath it. I took one step in. The tiles were colder than the carpet, nearly icy. The mirror above the sink reflected only fragments of me. One eye, the flashlight beam, the side of my pale face. The curtain didn't move. I stood there for 3, maybe 4 seconds, gathering the nerve to pull it open. Then I grabbed it and yanked. The metal rings screeched along the rod. The curtain snapped aside. The tub was empty. I almost collapsed with relief. There was nothing inside. Just the white enamel basin, the shadow of the faucet, a bottle of shampoo tipped on its side. I let out a breath that sounded ragged and ashamed.
Jesus.
But the relief didn't last. Because now that the curtain was open, I could see the bathroom clearly. And on the mirror above the sink, written in something greasy and faint, barely visible except when the flashlight hit at an angle, were 4 words. "You sleep very deep." I stumbled backward so hard my shoulder hit the door frame. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. For a second I thought the message might have always been there, that maybe steam from previous showers had left some accidental residue, and my frightened mind was turning random marks into letters. Then I stepped closer.
No.
They were deliberate. The words had been traced by a finger through a thin film of condensation or oil, leaving clear paths in the foggy residue on the glass. Whoever wrote them had done it slowly, carefully. The letters were long and narrow, almost elegant, not rushed, not angry, as though the person who wrote them had not been afraid of getting caught, as though they knew I wouldn't wake.
My stomach turned.
The flashlight beam wavered up the mirror, and for an instant it caught something else at the bottom edge of the sink cabinet. A wet footprint, not fully formed. Just the front half of a bare foot impressed faintly in grime and moisture. Too long, too narrow. I backed away from the sink. The bathroom felt suddenly tiny, airless. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, loud enough to drown everything else. I wanted out of that room, out of the apartment, out of the building. I turned and nearly ran back into the main room and stopped dead. My bed was visible from the bathroom doorway. The blanket still tangled. The pillow dented from where my head had been. And on top of the mattress, exactly where I had been sitting only moments before, lay my phone charger. Only it wasn't where I'd left it. The cable had been pulled free and arranged into a shape, a circle. At the center of that circle sat my pillow.
No. Not my pillow.
Something placed on top of my pillow. A photograph, freshly printed. My flashlight beam landed on it, and my blood seemed to go cold all at once. It was a picture of the bathroom doorway, taken from the bed. The angle looked slightly lower than eye level, like someone had been seated or crouched on the mattress while taking it. In the photo, I was visible in the bathroom mirror, standing there with the flashlight in my hand, staring at the message on the glass, which meant only one thing. While I was in the bathroom, something had been behind me, in the room,
Watching me.
Close enough to sit on my bed. Close enough to print the image. Close enough to arrange the charger cable in a neat little circle like a gift. A noise escaped my throat then. Not a scream. More like the sound a person makes when their body is trying to reject fear and failing. I spun around, swinging the flashlight wildly across the apartment. The beam struck the kitchenette wall, the closet, the front door, the ceiling,
The bathroom tiles.
My own shadow leapt monstrously in every direction.
Who's there? I shouted.
My voice cracked. No answer. But something moved. Not in the room.
On my phone.
A vibration in my hand. A new notification lit the screen. Gallery 1 new photo added. My entire body went numb. I looked down. The newest image was already there. I opened it with a shaking thumb. This time the photo showed me from behind, standing in the bathroom doorway, flashlight in hand, shoulders tensed, like a frightened animal. And at the far edge of the frame, partially hidden by the darkness near the closet, a face was visible for the first time. Not clear, not fully, but enough.
Pale skin.
A mouth stretched too wide to be natural, and eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. The figure was smiling, and below the photo in the blackness near the bottom of the frame, a caption had been typed in white text, "Turn around." I did not turn around. Not at first. My body locked so completely that even breathing became difficult. I stood there in the center of my apartment with my phone in one hand and the flashlight in the other, staring at the words on the screen while every part of me seemed to split in two. One half wanted to run. The other half was already convinced it was too late. The photo trembled in my hand. The caption at the bottom remained there, simple and clean and impossible. Turn around. I could hear my pulse in my throat now, a dull pounding that made the room feel narrower with each beat. The flashlight beam shook violently over the floorboards. The bars of streetlight coming through the blinds striped the walls and furniture, creating long black wounds across the room. Everything looked unreal, flattened, like a stage set built to resemble safety. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, from somewhere behind me, a soft creak. Not from the bathroom, not from the floor under my feet. From the main room, the unmistakable sound of weight settling onto the mattress. My bed. Something had sat down on my bed. The noise was light, almost delicate, as if whoever or whatever had lowered itself there carefully, making no more sound than necessary. My eyes lifted, not to turn, but to the bathroom mirror. The angle was wrong. I could only see a narrow sliver of the room behind me reflected in the fog-smudged glass. The edge of the bed, a corner of the lamp, darkness where the closet stood, nothing else. But I knew with the absolute certainty of prey that a presence had moved into the open the moment it realized fear had done its job. The room smelled stronger now. That wet, subterranean smell.
Mildew. Rainwater.
The cold rot of stone that never sees sunlight. Under it lay another scent, faint but unmistakable. Skin. Not clean skin. Not the ordinary human scent of sweat or soap. Something stale. Like a body that had spent too long in enclosed spaces. Fabric worn without washing. Breath trapped behind teeth. I made the mistake of inhaling too sharply. The smell filled my head. It was close. Very close. Please. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because the word had risen from some childish part of me that still believed fear could make monsters merciful. The apartment answered with silence. Then my phone vibrated again. Another image. I nearly dropped it. My thumb slid across the screen. The new photo was darker than the others, grainier, but the subject was unmistakable. The back of my own neck, lit by my flashlight spill. It had been taken from only inches away. So close that the image captured the fine hairs at the base of my skull. So close that whoever took it could have touched me with their mouth. My knees weakened. There was no more room left for disbelief. No safe explanation. No last rational corner to retreat into. Whatever this was, it moved when I moved. It watched while I looked elsewhere. It stood at my back in total silence, taking pictures with my own phone while I remained helplessly, stupidly alive. I shut my eyes. Not from courage, from collapse. And in the darkness behind my lids, Something returned to me, something I had buried so deeply I had convinced myself it was gone. A memory, not whole. A fragment. A camera flash. The smell of damp carpet. My own childhood bedroom. I opened my eyes at once, gasping. The apartment swayed around me. It wasn't possible. I hadn't thought about that room in years. My old house had been sold after my mother died. Everything inside it had been boxed, donated, discarded. Yet suddenly I could see that room with horrible clarity. The wallpaper with tiny moons and stars, the wardrobe door that never fully shut, the pale rectangle of moonlight across the floor. And in that memory, a figure standing in the doorway, watching me sleep. I had always told myself it was a dream.
Hadn't I?
A child's nightmare. Something imagined after grief. Something created by loneliness. But now, as I stood in my apartment with a stranger's presence nearly breathing against my neck, that old memory began to reshape itself into something far worse. Not a dream, a rehearsal. My phone screen dimmed slightly, and in that dark glass I saw it at last. Not clearly. Not fully. Just enough. A shape behind my shoulder. A face leaning down beside mine. Pale, stretched skin that looked too smooth in some places and too loose in others, as though it had been arranged by uncertain hands. Eyes sunk deep, reflecting the weak light as bright wet points. The mouth wider than it should have been, lips thin and colorless, curving upward not in joy but in a private, patient imitation of it. And the hair, long, hanging forward in limp strands as if permanently wet. The scream tore out of me then, raw, animal. I spun around, flashlight whipping up in a white arc. The beam struck the bed. Something was there. For one impossible second, I saw it perfectly. A tall, narrow figure crouched on the mattress, knees bent under it like a grotesque bird. Its limbs were too long, especially the arms, which folded inward around my phone with a strange, protective intimacy. Its head was tilted. Its smile did not break when the light hit it. The skin of its face looked almost human, but wrong in the way a reflection becomes wrong when a mirror bends. The eyes were glossy and fixed. Hungry not for flesh, I realized in that instant, but for attention, for reaction, for the exact expression that must have been on my face now. It wore something pale and thin, maybe a nightgown or maybe only strips of fabric hanging from its frame. Its bare feet were gray at the soles, damp, narrow, the toes unnaturally long. And before my mind could do anything useful with what it saw, the thing moved. Not fast in the ordinary sense. It moved with a silent, gliding violence that made speed seem almost irrelevant, unfolding from the bed in one fluid motion and passing into the darkness near the closet before the flashlight beam could follow. I stumbled backward, slamming into the bathroom wall. The beam jerked wildly. Closet. Kitchen counter. Nothing. Gone. But not gone. Still here. My own scream echoed in my ears, thin and humiliating against the vast silence that followed. I was crying now without realizing it, tears hot on my cheeks, breath tearing in and out of me in broken strokes. I needed to leave. Not in a minute. Not after another look. Now. I lunged toward the front door. 3 steps. That was all it should have taken. But on the second step, my bare foot slipped on something wet. I crashed to one knee, pain exploding up my leg. The flashlight rolled from my hand and spun across the floor, throwing dizzying circles of light around the room until it finally came to rest facing the ceiling. For a second, the entire apartment became a chamber of warped shadows. My hand landed in the wetness, cold,
Viscous.
I looked down. Not blood. Water. No, something like water. Cloudy. Thin. Smelling of mildew and old pipes. It had dripped in a trail across the floorboards from the direction of the closet. A trail of damp footprints crossed it. Footprints too long to be mine. They led toward the front door. My head snapped up. The chain was hanging loose. The deadbolt was unlocked. Very slowly, with the awful softness of a person trying not to wake a sleeping child, the front doorknob began to turn. I scrambled backwards so hard my palms burned against the floor. The knob turned fully. The door eased inward. But there was no one behind it. Only the dim apartment hallway outside, lit by a flickering bulb. The open doorway yawned there like a mouth. Cold air drifted in. For one mad, dizzy second, I thought, it's letting me leave. Then my phone flashed in my hand again. Another image.
I opened it.
The photo showed the apartment door from the hallway outside, taken from several feet back. The angle looked chest high, steady,
Waiting.
The timestamp was the current minute, which meant the picture had been taken from the hall at the same moment the knob had begun to turn from inside. I stared at the image, unable to breathe. Then the obvious truth slid into place with horrible ease. There wasn't one of it, or if there was, it did not obey space the way living things did. A sound came from behind me, very close. A wet inhalation. I twisted around on the floor. The closet door, still shut until now, stood slowly, steadily opening inward by itself. Darkness filled the widening crack. Not empty darkness, occupied darkness. Something inside shifted. I crawled backward until my shoulders struck the front door frame. The hallway light flickered overhead. My flashlight still lay on the floor, its beam aimed upward, illuminating the room from below like a stage lit for a confession. The closet opened wider. Then I saw why the smell had felt familiar. It wasn't the smell of a basement. It was the smell of old photographs. Damp cardboard boxes, mildewed albums. The rot of paper kept too long in humidity. And from the dark interior of the closet, photographs began to slide out onto the floor. Dozens, then hundreds. They spilled in a slow, whispering cascade, glossy prints skimming over one another and spreading across the boards like black water. Every single one showed me sleeping. Not just tonight. Different beds, different sheets, different rooms. A dorm room from college, a couch in an old apartment, a cheap motel room from a road trip I barely remembered, even my childhood bedroom with the moon and star wallpaper. Years of my life lay there in mute, shining stacks, all recorded from the corners of rooms where I had believed myself alone. My stomach convulsed.
No, I was...
Then louder, no. Some of the photos were close, intimate, obscene in their tenderness, my face in profile, my hand hanging off a mattress, my throat exposed, the vulnerable slackness of sleep. Others were taken from hallways, doorways, closets. Some had dates scrawled across the borders in a spidery hand. Some had notes. Age 9 fever cried before sleeping, moved apartment, still doesn't wake the world, tilted. I felt my mind recoil from itself. This was not a random intruder. Not a stranger who had picked a lock tonight. Not a one-time horror. This thing had followed me, or found me again and again. For years, maybe forever. A photograph slid farther than the others and stopped near my knee. My hand moved before I could stop it. It showed me as a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, lying in bed under a cartoon blanket. My face was turned toward the wall. One arm hugged a stuffed animal I had not thought of in decades. At the edge of the frame, a pale hand rested lightly on the mattress beside my head. On the back of the photo, in the same thin handwriting, were 3 words. Almost took you a sound rose from the closet. At first I thought it was laughter. Then I understood it was breathing. Deep, delighted. I looked up. The darkness inside the closet had depth now. Impossible depth. Far more space than the dimensions of the apartment allowed. It resembled a corridor receding endlessly into black, its walls lined with flashes of Waitrose, and rows of photographs pinned or hung were stacked in endless perspective. And in that depth, shapes moved. Not one, many. Tall, narrow outlines shifting soundlessly as if turning their attention toward me all at once. The one from the bed stepped into view first. Its smile had widened. Not physically, not like flesh being pulled further back, but conceptually, as if I now understood that the expression had always been larger than a face could contain. It lifted one hand.
My phone was still in it.
How had it taken it from me? I didn't even remember losing it. Its fingers stroked the screen once with terrible gentleness. The gallery opened. A live camera view filled the display. Not of me, of the inside of the closet. And on that screen, I could see what my eyes couldn't fully accept in the dark. Walls covered floor to ceiling with sleeping faces.
Mine.
Hundreds of them. Thousands. Different ages. Different angles. Decades of unconsciousness curated like devotion. The creature tilted the phone toward me, showing me my own history as if presenting a family album. Then, in a voice so soft it might have been the friction of paper sliding over paper, it spoke for the first time. "You always look sweetest when you dreamed." The words barely disturbed the air, but they broke something in me. I lunged for the flashlight, snatched it up, and hurled it as hard as I could at the thing's face. The heavy metal body struck with a sickening crack. The creature jerked backward. The flashlight dropped, beam spinning. Its scream came then, not loud but layered, as though many throats hidden inside one body had cried out together. The photos on the floor shivered. The darkness inside the closet seemed to ripple. The other shapes behind it stirred. I didn't think. I ran. Out the apartment door, into the hallway, barefoot and half sobbing, slamming into the opposite wall before catching myself. I sprinted toward the stairwell, expecting at any moment to feel fingers hook into my shoulders from behind. The hall lights flickered in sequence as I passed beneath them. 2, 3. At the far end, the stairwell door stood ajar. I reached it, shoved through, nearly fell down the first flight, caught the railing and kept going. My breath sawed in my chest. My feet slapped concrete. Every landing smelled of dust, rusted pipes, and old paint. Somewhere above me or below me another door banged, or maybe it only echoed in memory. I no longer trusted sound. I got to the lobby and burst out into the street. Rain had started while I slept. A cold, needling drizzle fell through the sodium yellow glow of the street lamps. Cars hissed past at the far end of the block. Somewhere a siren wailed, distant and indifferent. I stumbled into the middle of the sidewalk and turned back toward my building. My apartment window was on the 3rd floor. Dark, empty-looking. Then a light flared inside. Not the lamp. A white-blue rectangle. Phone light. A figure stood at the window, barely visible behind the glass, holding the glowing screen at face level, watching me from above. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I recoiled so hard I nearly fell. Slowly, numb with dread, I pulled it out. How it had gotten back into my pocket, I don't know. The screen showed one final new image, taken from inside my apartment window. Looking down at me in the rain, my face upturned, my mouth open, my body small and helpless in the streetlight. At the bottom, beneath the image, the caption read, "Don't stay awake too long."
I didn't go back to the apartment that night.
I didn't even stop running until I reached the gas station 3 blocks away. The place was open 24 hours, fluorescent lights humming like trapped insects above the aisles. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when I burst inside, soaking wet and shaking. He probably thought I was drunk or high or coming down from something. Maybe I looked that way. Maybe I sounded that way when I asked if I could sit. He just nodded and went back to his phone. I took the plastic chair near the coffee machine and stared at my hands. They wouldn't stop trembling. The smell of mildew still clung to me, not just to my clothes, to my skin, to my lungs. Every breath I took carried it deeper into me. I kept glancing at the glass doors, half expecting that pale face to appear outside under the rain and stare in through the reflection. But nothing came. Cars passed. A truck driver came in and bought cigarettes. The clerk yawned. The normal world moved along with complete indifference to what had just happened to me. After about 10 minutes, I realized something. My phone was still in my pocket. I hadn't thrown it away, hadn't smashed it, hadn't even considered leaving it behind. Slowly, carefully, like someone handling a live insect, I pulled it out. The screen was dark. No notifications. No new images. Just my reflection staring back at me from the black glass. I didn't want to unlock it. Every instinct screamed not to. But curiosity has a terrible power when mixed with fear. Eventually, my thumb moved. The phone unlocked. The gallery opened automatically.
My breath caught.
The photographs from the closet were gone. All of them. Every image of me sleeping in different rooms, different years gone. The only things left were the 2 from tonight. The first one from the corner of my room. The second one beside the bed. Nothing else. The gallery looked clean, normal, as if the rest had never existed. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I noticed the time. 4:02 a.m., only 45 minutes had passed since the first notification. It felt like hours, like days. My mind felt scraped hollow. Eventually, the clerk walked over and asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. I didn't even like coffee. but I needed something warm in my hands. He poured it and slid the paper cup toward me.
You okay? He asked. I nodded too quickly.
Yeah. He looked unconvinced but shrugged and went back to the counter. I wrapped both hands around the cup and stared out the glass doors again. The rain had slowed. The sky was beginning to lighten at the edges. Dawn. I thought about my apartment, about the closet, about the photographs sliding across the floor, about the shapes behind the darkness. My chest tightened again. I knew I couldn't go back, not alone. Maybe with the police, maybe with friends, maybe never. I sat there until the sky turned pale gray and the street lamps switched off one by one. Eventually, the city began to wake. People walked dogs. Cars filled the roads. The world returned. By 7 in the morning, my fear had started to feel distant, not gone, but unreal. Like something remembered from a nightmare that fades under daylight. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Maybe I had panicked over nothing. Maybe the photos were a glitch. Maybe the message on the mirror had been old residue. Maybe my phone vibrated.
I froze.
The coffee cup slipped slightly in my hands. A new notification. I didn't want to look, but I did. Gallery 1 new photo added. The timestamp reads 7:03 a.m.
Right now. My chest tightened. I opened it.
The image loaded slowly. For a moment, all I saw was the ceiling. Then the camera tilted slightly, and I realized what I was looking at. The photograph showed the inside of the gas station,
The fluorescent lights.
the aisles, the coffee machine, and me, sitting in the plastic chair, holding the paper cup, staring down at the phone. The photo had been taken from behind the counter. My head lifted slowly. The clerk stood there exactly where he had been before, scrolling on his phone, not looking at me. The store was empty except for us. My heart pounded. Maybe the phone camera had activated somehow. Maybe it had captured the image earlier. Maybe the clerk's phone vibrated. He frowned slightly and looked down at it. Then he smiled, not a friendly smile, not even a human one, just a thin, familiar curve of the mouth. He lifted the phone slightly, as if showing it to someone standing beside him, but there was no one there. Then he looked directly at me, and his voice when he spoke was soft, almost gentle. Exactly the same voice that had whispered in the closet. "You still wake up too easily." My coffee cup slipped from my hands and hit the floor. The phone vibrated again. Another photo appeared. I didn't even need to open it to know what it would show, but I did anyway. This one was closer, taken from behind my chair, so close that my neck filled the frame, and just at the edge of the image, a pale hand reaching toward me. The caption beneath it read, "Almost took you."